Howdy, folks, and welcome to your storm chasing forecast show for Friday, August 14th. I am Gabriel Harbor, and I am joined here today by Coach Cameron Nixon. Cameron, how you doing
Hello,
over there?
hello. I'm good. Actually, nice and stuffed. Just had some hibachi for dinner. It is time to get to work.
Very nice, and I was actually worried there for a moment that we weren't going to get to see your radiant face because we were
Yeah,
having some technical difficulties before we started.
yeah. This $1,000 laptop is not treating me very well so far.
Maybe you can get Coach Hunter to help you out. His setup is apparently all finished, and he did his group coaching presentation last night and
Oh,
did a
nice.
great job talking about upslope regimes.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's quite
Well, speaking
spicy.
of Hunter,
Yeah, this is his old stomping grounds. Unfortunately, no upslope regimes to speak of, but we do have this
no.
2% tornado risk here in Iowa, pretty squarely in the center of the state. So maybe, Cameron, you could
Yeah,
give us a high level overview of what we might be expecting today with this. It's very round, by the way, it's almost a perfect circle.
it is very pleasingly round. Yeah, and throw up a couple other hazards. Just got a broad 5 wind and a couple areas of 5 hail, maybe some upslope, maybe some upslope.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is actually like the Hunter
Yeah,
forecast. Holy smokes.
yeah. Look at that. Why isn't he doing this? Okay. Yeah. So let's take a look at the ceiling today. And before I go into this, I think it's easy for me to kind of be a little bit jaded about this kind of forecast. Definitely think that there is some potential for storm watching if you live in this local area. Maybe even, especially, just a little bit to the southwest of here, too. We'll have to take a look at that. But what to expect? Probably some big bad storms. Should they fire? Probably a little bit of wind, lots of dark clouds, lots of rain. Good old summertime storm experience. So let's go into kind of what is exactly driving this, as what I think Hunter actually pointed out amongst our chaser coaches, is that we do have a shortwave here, kind of spilling out from the high plains into this area here. Timing looks a little bit sus. Maybe it just might be a little bit too fast, leaving a lot of this area that we're going to be focusing on in the wake. But definitely still a shortwave here, and it looks like some just subtle flow over the high terrain too that could serve as a focus for that. But I'm definitely going to focus on this shortwave since it seems to be the most agitated thing out here. And given its really small size, I'm guessing this has something to do with some kind of convective complex that originated overnight last night over Colorado and moving through Nebraska. And as we go down, maybe you could see this in a little bit more high def detail. There it is in all of its glory, making its way up into eastern Nebraska and Iowa. Actually, maybe not as compact as it was at 500, which is actually pretty cool. So we have a very strong and increasingly, I guess, that is increasing circulation as we go up in the atmosphere. So this is also going to bring with it actually some fairly strong low level winds as well. As we go throughout the day, we have this kind of moderately strong low level jet here emanating from the southern plains, nosing into this area. And I can tell you, it's actually been pretty windy here lately. Yesterday was that a little bit gusty, not quite windy, but definitely gusty. So I can tell something's happening here. And surface pattern wise, we just had this broad low yesterday, maybe some semblance of a low pressure developing here out ahead of that incoming shortwave, but otherwise a fairly kind of nebulous surface pattern here, but for maybe a little bit of relief with a little cool front down here in Kansas. I think the main story today is going to be our dew points, though, as it often is in the Midwest. And you can see there's a lot of this remnant moisture just sitting here over the corn land here and just converging over this general area east of that incoming shortwave. And again, you could see like there's some semblance of a boundary here, some semblance of a cool front. You can see the winds are shifted north just behind this. So definitely looking at you here as kind of the greatest potential for some kind of convergence and initiation just by looking at this. Maybe we could look a little bit more high res, maybe look at the HER for kind of another look as to what the setup could look like. But we definitely see our strongest convergence here of our surface pattern over the kind of just north of Kansas City area. So remember when I said we might be paying a little bit more attention to southwest of that 2%. I'm thinking this is where most of the action is going to occur. And if we shift to Nam Nest land, pretty much the same thing. This front even farther back here, maybe some initiation along this lifting warm front remnant outflow boundary, though. That is to be determined. So maybe I will just throw up kind of a Cape map. Let's do some NAM. Let's give the NAM some love. And we'll start plucking some soundings just to see exactly what we're dealing with today. You could see definitely some semblance of a remnant outflow boundary from previous convection. We haven't even looked at kind of the progression of this morning's convection into the evening, but it's very likely it will leave some kind of outflow boundary here across the area. And then you have that, again, that cool front here. So if we start plucking some soundings along that remnant outflow boundary, not a bad parameter space, all else being equal. Lots of Cape here, almost 80-degree dew points, and some decent looking photographs. So Supercell's definitely in the cards. Got some strong deep layer shear here. Even tornado potential. I can see why they added that 2% now. Some nice photograph curvature too. What I'm not liking here is how sopping wet this entire profile is. Maybe if we go just below this, it might get a little bit drier. Yeah, not too bad. And photograph still looks good even south of this. So definitely a messy looking thermo profile, but a very good looking photograph. And maybe a little bit farther down that boundary here, pluck a sounding or two. This looks a little bit better. A little bit drier air here, lots of Cape, and nice photograph curvature too. Could squeeze something out of here too. I think a lot of it is going to have to do with how convection evolves into this morning, because again, we're forecasting very early in the morning here. We don't exactly know how convection is going to evolve, but most solutions show just very messy kind of convection. It's just a lot of competing convective complexes like we've had over the last couple days here. NamNest actually very similar, has a convective complex over Illinois, but another one kind of scooting east over Iowa. I don't know what is driving storm motion here. It looks like there's 8 different storm motions for all these. And then something that I was definitely looking at is this little guy. See that little spinny here? That is a remnant mesoscale convective vortex, MCV. And so this is what is associated with that shortwave that we were tracking earlier. So as that kind of pinwheels into this area, this is going to add kind of that background synoptic lift for some future potential storms here. And as you can see, we get kind of an initiation in northeast Kansas here into Iowa here. And I realized, Gabe, that I think I completely missed your introduction. We just swiftly went into cam land. So I will let you deal me any questions you have before we do that.
Listen, I was not one to interrupt greatness while it is unfolding in front of me, so I just appreciate that I get a chance to ask a few questions. And you actually nailed what I was about to talk about is the MCV. I know reading the SPC
Yes.
Outlook, they were a little bit concerned about how organized it might be. So maybe you could just share what does it mean for an MCV to be organized, and how can that actually affect a storm's potential severity?
Yeah, definitely. And as a former resident of the Corn Belt, a lot of our tornado events were actually caused by remnant MCVs. A little bit earlier in the season, but these are often prolific tornado producers in the right kind of setting. I noticed I actually did a study of these, and I noticed their ability to be associated with tornado events tended to really ramp up as you got into eastern Iowa, into Illinois, Indiana, and even Ohio, this kind of area. The sample of cases that I could find, at least, of remnant MCV tornado events west of there into the Great Plains, it's actually pretty small. So it's something about the prevailing pattern over the plains that just does not do good with remnant MCVs. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But what you get is just a lot of convections. This is last night's kind of convection blossoming over eastern Colorado. Basically, if you get the right kind of thermodynamic environment, it's got to be very moist and weak enough shear that you can literally produce kind of an extra tropical cyclone here. This is how you get these remnant MCVs, and they will just continue kind of carouseling into the Midwest throughout the course of the day. And this is what we could literally see on 500 millibars, right? This is our circulation that we were tracking here in the very beginning. That's quite literally the remnant MCV, that circulation here at 500. So when they look like they're spinning, that's because they actually are.
So is that what gives them that increased tornadic potential? The fact that it's really just putting everything in the local environment into a very spinny situation?
Yes, definitely. I think a big player here is what it does to the low level wind field. Maybe I'll throw 700 millibars up here because in the summertime and in generally weakly sheared environments, you're pretty stagnant. You generally lack shear, but these MCVs plow through and all of a sudden you have 30, 35 knots of shear. And that's definitely enough for tornado potential here.
Yeah, I also noticed in that same SPC outlook, they were talking about how with the higher organization, especially if it arrives a little bit earlier in the day, they could definitely see the risk level getting enhanced,
Oh,
moving up.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that one of the big problems with a day like today, where you might not have that shear, could definitely be this. This could be the sort of thing that really sorts that out.
Yeah, definitely. I think what seems to be different about today compared to other days that I've chased in the Midwest that were a success, it's just a surface pattern. This is definitely a kind of a wonky surface pattern. I guess you do have that modifying outflow out east here, but forcing seems to be very weak here. There doesn't seem to be much convergence here. And then you just have this kind of cold front triple point thing that starts sagging south. So not really similar to a lot of MCV events that I've personally had success in, but I'd definitely be surprised.
And last question on the whole MCV front. How do you feel about the term land hurricane being thrown around whenever we see one of those bad boys on radar?
It forms in a similar way. It sure as heck ain't as strong as a hurricane, but sometimes these things really do resemble tropical depressions. And I'm a big proponent of we just throw things in boxes arbitrarily. Yeah, it's a similar process.
Yeah, I love how without fail every single time there's someone on WX Twitter who is screeching about
Yes.
it's not a land hurricane. But yeah, we'll get into cam versus cams here in just a second. Before we do that, just remember, folks, this is WeatherFront in all of its glory that you are watching on screen right now. And there is a big announcement coming out in a couple of days. If you hadn't
Mm,
heard, Android is in early access beta right now for folks who have been able to sign up for that. I'm sure you're having a good time, but I'm going
yes.
to go out on a limb and say that might be opening up for everyone here shortly, and
Ooh.
we do have an office hours Q&A session scheduled for next week with the one of the two owners of Weatherfront, John Bangoff. He's going to be doing a show
Oh
here
man,
on
I
Storm
can't.
Chaser Coaching's YouTube channel, and he'll be talking about all the new changes that are coming your way for Weatherfront, so you'll want to check that out.
When is that, Gabe?
I believe that's on the 17th. Let me actually pull up. I
Okay.
got the schedule right here. Yeah,
Probably a good thing.
Monday, August 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for saving me there, Cameron,
Awesome.
and not letting me get away without actually telling people when that's
Yes.
scheduled. So I'll drop a link to that in the description so you guys, it's in our Discord server, the event calendar, so you guys can check it out there. All right, Cameron, it is time. Cam versus cams.
Yeah, I think you'd actually be surprised. This is this seemed to be, at least on my first glance, a pretty well modeled, consistent feature. And her has pretty much the same thing over pretty much the same area, maybe a little bit less saturated, so you get less of kind of the reflectivity around there, but definitely still that MCV. See it popping off a little bit of convection later on. That's quite common because we're so saturated there. It really doesn't take much to ignite more convection around it. And as we go on over the course of the day, just get this messy kind of convection over Iowa, then maybe southward into Missouri, get a supercell or two before things grow very upscale. As we saw, we had lots of cape and lots of moisture. Classic, yes, maybe damaging wind potential down here. Actually, her has this thing going pretty gangbusters as it gets into Illinois. So that might be pretty interesting overnight. And as you can see, the convection kind of down further along that cold front, really not much to write home about. We could throw up the NAM nest. Again, kind of has just general convection in kind of the core of that MCV. This is common. Then it ignites the MCS from there. So really interesting difference in kind of evolutions where the HER initiates the storms farther down south along the cold front draping southward, whereas the NAM initiates it all in kind of the actual MCV itself. I've definitely seen both evolutions, and I can't really tell you which is most likely. But you could also see this convection in Kansas really struggling to do much. We could kind of pluck a sounding out ahead of this just to take a look at what that might look like. Ooh, even some signal for elevated storms. I kind of saw that in the way the HER was simulating that bow. It looked a little bit elevated-y to me, but really strong cloud layer shear here and lots of cape rooted above the boundary layer. See that stable layer just below that. So it could even be some hail in these kind of things if they were to form like this. RFS, take a look at our favorite. And you know what? We're just going to go straight to the MPAD. I think that's probably the wisest decision here. Does it also have the MCV? Yes, it does. Look at that. Pretty unanimous here. So well-modeled feature. Again, Iowa gets kind of left out in the dark. I know we were dealing with a 2% here, but most cams here are unanimously vetoing against Iowa here, except for the NAM 3 kilometer. Just general convection down here. Maybe look at the NSSL. Same thing. Definitely misses Iowa for the most part. Let's give the ARW some love too. Maybe a little bit more love for Iowa, but again, probably the most robust stuff forms a little bit south of there, east of there into Illinois. So with that, I hope you're able to find something if you go out, and happy shelf cloud chasing.
To those who celebrate.
Yes, yes.
Remember to check out those links in the description below, and then watch another video.